Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Troy Clayton, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Major Elizabeth Daly. 2026 marks 125 years of dedicated service by the Australian Army and its predecessors. Today we remember and pay tribute to Signalman Alexander Henry Young. Today marks the 75th anniversary of the first National Service Training Scheme, which ran from 1951 to 1959. In response to the Cold War and Australia's commitments to Malaya and Korea, in 1951, the Australian government introduced the first National Service Act. This provided for the compulsory call-up of men turning 18 for 6 months military service training, followed by 5 years in the reserves. Between 1951 and 1959, over 500,000 men registered and some 227,000 men were trained. This scheme was terminated in 1959, but before long, another would be introduced. Again, due to the Cold War tensions and situations developing in Indonesia and Vietnam, in late 1964, a second National Service Act was introduced. This required men aged 20 years and older to register to serve for 2 years, followed by 3 years in the reserves. In 1965, the Defence Act was also amended, allowing for the national servicemen to be sent for active service in Borneo and South Vietnam. Between 1951 and 1972, a total of 287,000 young Australian men were called up in the two national service schemes. Of them, 2 died in Borneo during the Indonesian confrontation and 210 in Vietnam. Today we remember all those who served under the national service schemes. We pay our respects to the men and women commemorated here on the Roll of Honour and to the survivors who returned home. This evening we are honoured to welcome the members of the National Servicemen's Association of Australia and their family members who are joining us for the ceremony. We warmly welcome all those who attended the commemorative service to mark the 75th anniversary of National Service 1951 to 1972, held earlier today in the Great Hall of the Australian Parliament House. We are also honoured to acknowledge Chief of Joint Capabilities, Lieutenant General Susan Coyle. Also Ron Brandy, President of the National Servicemen's Association, joined by Noel Mulder, National Vice President. As always, we welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Return and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. Thank you. You may be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Signalman Alexander Henry Young. Known as Alex, he was born in Murwillumbah, New South Wales on the 29th of May, 1946, to Philip George and Florence Mary Elizabeth Young. He was one of 3 sons born to the couple. He grew up in Chillingham, east of Murwillumbah, and attended the local school. After completing Year 5, he left school. It was also around this time that his parents separated. Florence took her sons and moved to the southern Brisbane suburb of Acacia Ridge. Alex went to work in a rubber manufacturing factory and spent 4 years working shift work. As soon as he turned 18, Alex gained his motorcycle licence, which expanded his horizons. When working nights became too much, Alex left Brisbane to work as a station hand for 6 months, after which he returned home and found employment in a timber yard. Outside of work, he served with the 11th Field Regiment, the Royal Australian Artillery, at the unit's Annerley Depot for 2 years. He also enjoyed going out with friends and dancing. By the early 1960s, Australia's commitment to regional security had drawn the nation into several conflicts in Asia, stretching the armed services. The National Service Act 1964 was passed in late November that year, which required 20-year-old males to serve in the army for a period of 2 years continuous service if selected. Young was called up for national service in August 1966, and he entered basic training at Kapooka on the 26th of September. This was followed by corps training at the School of Signals. In March 1967, after qualifying as a lineman field, he was posted to 139 Signal Squadron at Enoggera, north of Brisbane. In mid-October, Young attended the Battle Efficiency course at the Jungle Training Centre, Canberra. This was in preparation for his deployment to South Vietnam. Young flew out of Sydney on the 3rd of March 1968. After overnighting in Manila, he arrived in Saigon the following day. He was flown to Nui Dat, home of the 1st Australian Task Force, where he was taken on strength of 104 Signal Squadron. On the 24th of April, Young was part of his unit's forward element, sent to Bearcat Base in Bien Hoa Province in preparation for a major operation against enemy units. On the 12th of May, units of the 1st Australian Task Force began deploying to a position 25 kilometres north of Bien Hoa, where they set up Fire Support Base Coral. Their task was to disrupt enemy troops withdrawing from Saigon after a major offensive. Young was again part of his unit's forward element and was kept busy setting up communications. The 1st Australian Task Force had never conducted an operation on this scale before, and the insertion of troops to the area of operations was beset by delays and confusion. Nearby, enemy soldiers observed the Australian deployment to the open area that was going to become Fire Support Base Coral and began their preparations in likelihood for a large-scale attack. The Australians experienced several enemy contacts during the evening, which were later realised to be probing attacks. By 6:30 a.m, the enemy had been driven back with heavy losses, and the defenders of Fire Support Base Coral took stock. 11 Australians were killed and 28 were wounded. In the early hours of the 16th of May, Fire Support Base Coral came under attack again. Rocket and mortar fire pounded the Australian positions, and it was during the early stages of the battle that Young was struck by shrapnel and killed instantly. Several hours of heavy fighting ensued, after which the enemy withdrew after having suffered heavy casualties. The Australians suffered 5 men killed and 19 men wounded. Young's remains were returned to Australia, and on the 31st of May, he was laid to rest with full military honours in the Anzac section of the Mount Gravatt Cemetery and Crematorium. The epitaph on his headstone reads, "Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends." He was 21 years old. When 104 Signal Squadron built a training room at Nui Dat in 1969, it was named the Alexander Young Training Room in his honour. A photograph and a memorial plaque were placed in this room at its opening. Today, one combat signal regiment based in Darwin continues to honour Young's life by naming the unit's training room after him. Young's name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, along with more than 500 others from the Vietnam War. His photograph is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is one but many stories of courage and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Signalman Alexander Henry Young, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
If you're able, please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We'll remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub of Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.